Blender won an Oscar, and that's massive.
And the Oscar goes to Flow.
Flow.
So let's talk about different things. Was the movie any good? Is Blender now the industry standard? What was the process behind the movie? And what's next? I'm Dude Blender, and let's jump right in. So first of all, who are these people? Gints Zilbalodis is a Latvian filmmaker that had already written, scored, animated, and produced another movie called Away back in 2019. And needless to say, that's a massive undertaking for just one person. That one was done in Maya. Matis Kaza is a Swedish, Latvian, and American director, writer, and producer that has worked on several indie projects, and there's not really much information about him on the internet. Zilbalodis started the movie by himself and gradually added more people to the team.
Flow is actually the first film I've made with a team.
Interestingly enough, the animators that worked on the project had a Maya background and were given a week of training in Blender to make the switch. The production budget was under $4 million, which we need to put into perspective. Disney and Pixar can easily drop up to 200 millions in a movie. DreamWorks spends a little bit less, and their budgets are usually around 75 to 85 million. Those are the big boys. But then you also have studios like Ghibli or even Netflix movies that usually invest around 20 to 30 million per flick. Then you have movies like Flow or Memoir of a Snail, which was also nominated, with budgets of maybe a few million. And below that, you have these solo movie makers that maybe spend a few thousands, maybe a few hundreds of thousands to make their own projects. So Flow's 4 million is pretty low for an animated movie, but it's not negligible. You can actually do something with it. It's a workable budget. Other movies have done it in the past, but it's usually extremely challenging. So let's see how they pulled this off. And a big part of the genius was the process and the creative choices that they made. Here are a few of them. The first one is that it's a silent movie. This allows him to save a lot of money on very complex animation of the faces and gestures that go into a movie where characters speak. You also save on the voice cast. Of course, this creates a new problem, which is keeping the movie interesting. The second thing is he used Eevee, and Zilbalodis mentions in this interview that one of the reasons that he liked Blender was that he could speed up his whole workflow with a real-time render engine. And this allowed him not only to render out the scenes faster, but also setting up lights, materials, getting the right look, and working with responsive files. Another thing was that he went for an unrealistic style, and to be honest, I think that if you have less than $10 million, you really have no choice. You cannot actually attempt to have more detailed materials and textures like the ones we see with Pixar or DreamWorks. That's an interesting thing because it not only sets you apart from what's already out there, because it looks completely different, but at the same time it saves you money by not having to make those very complex, very detailed textures. With all of these animals, just making the fur would have been really expensive. The beauty of doing this is the differentiation that you get as compared to the other studios. See, if you show different movies to a lot of people, if they don't know which studio made that movie, it's almost impossible to tell apart, because they all kind of look the same. Let's call it the industry standard look. High quality, very detailed textures, expensive lighting, complex character animations. If you compare Flow to them, it looks completely different, which of course is good at the risk of looking lower quality. And the last thing I want to mention is he did not use storyboards.
So I do that instead of drawing storyboards.
I love this. Usually, storyboards are a huge part of the traditional process. They help visualize the scenes, they help communicate them to the teams, and you can make changes before they even begin to work on the more expensive 3D process. Zilbalodis did pretty much the exact opposite.
I would just create these sets in 3D and take a virtual camera and almost like a live action location scout.
They build the place and then just go out there and explore it. Having that and a real-time renderer like Eevee allows you to not make the storyboards and make animatics instead. So you can do your creativity and brainstorming directly in the 3D environment, which is insanely useful. Now, with all of this, how does the movie measure up against other Oscar nominees? Is it objectively a better movie? And in my opinion, it's complicated. The Oscar that Flow got was the big one, Best Animated Feature. It beat DreamWorks, that had The Wild Robot, and Pixar that had Inside Out 2. And it's worth mentioning that Disney wasn't even in the game, since Moana 2 didn't get nominated. If you see things technically, it's evident that Flow lacks the polish of other movies. You can clearly see the difference in materials and textures, diversity of environments, accuracy of animations, the music score, and of course the fact that there are no voice artists here. And yes, all of this is expected because the budget is 1/20th of The Wild Robot and 1/50th of Inside Out 2. Of course, it shows. Compared movie to movie, in technical aspects, Flow is not a match. However, where it shines is in the ingenuity of the developers, their creative choices, and how they were able to stretch a shoestring budget into a beautiful film, to develop something that looks completely different to every other movie that's out there, and to provide an experience that big budget movies simply cannot afford to do. Considering the whole context, Flow completely deserves the Oscar, and that's what the voters might have seen. But then, is the movie fun? And this is a big point of controversy. I don't think I would use that word. I would say it's beautiful, it's contemplative, it's zen, it's enjoyable. I don't know if it's fun, and I don't know if it tries to be. If you read the reviews, you'll find that critics love it and audiences mostly like it, and some of them hate it. And those who hated it, I think, expected a Hollywood movie. But this is not a Hollywood movie. There are no extreme emotions, no plot twists, no payoff at the end. The movie just kind of flows, happens, unfolds, and then it ends, and then you leave the theater. It's also different as Hollywood movies like to explain every single detail, provide all of the context, background of the characters, clear objectives, the mission, the villains, a conflict that you expect to be resolved. And by the end of the movie, you have a feeling that the good guys struggled, then won, and the bad guys lost, and a lot of stuff happened and changed. Flow doesn't really have any of that. It never explains the context. It never explains why there are no humans. It never explains what is causing the flood. Where's all that water coming from? We don't know, and I got a feeling that I wanted to know. I thought it was an interesting part of the story that just got ignored. There are no villains, and sure, some of the characters are not friendly, but they're not villains. And the conflict in the movie, the problem, since you don't even know what's causing it, so what the problem actually is, the characters cannot solve it. So in a way, you get this feeling that you're navigating the movie without a clear destination, and by the end of the movie, it feels like nothing fundamentally changed. Still, because this movie is so different in so many ways, visually, emotionally, and in how the story unfolds, it feels like a refreshing cup of tea when everyone else is drinking Pepsi. And now, what is next? Does this Oscar change the industry? What's gonna happen? And the first thing that I think we should do is, I think we should celebrate. Let's watch the movie. Buy it, stream it, go to the movie theater, I think it's still on in some places, and help to make it bigger. And let's take this for what it is. I don't think Blender will ever be the industry standard. And I don't even think we want it to be. Blender is its own industry. It's for indie filmmakers, it's for content creators, it's for artists that like to play by different rules, and that can be very lucrative. Flow, without being part of the awful Hollywood system, made 20 million, 5 times its investment, and probably made some people very wealthy. So to me, Blender is anything you want it to be, and that's the cool thing about it. That's it for today's video. I'm Dude Blender. Happy blending.